All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the fourth live chat in our series about the AAAS Science and Technology Policy Fellowships Program, also known as STPF. My name is Marav Sarwar. I'm the recruitment director here and will be your moderator today. As you might know, this live chat series is an opportunity for you to ask STPF fellows your questions. And we hope that through these chats, you'll see how through the fellowship you can impact policy and have a transformative experience. So onto a few housekeeping items. One, excited to share that the application is open. So thank you for your patience as we have navigated this past summer into opening the application. So they're open now, and the applications are still due by November 1st. A complete application must be submitted. That means verification of all your application materials and receipt of all letters of recommendation. These fellowships are an opportunity for doctoral level scientists and engineers to spend a year contributing their expertise to federal policy. They are paid 1 year full-time commitment in Washington, D.C. And for a sense of timing, for someone who applies now in 2025, they will be considered for a position in the fellowship class that runs for September 2026 to August of 2027. Okay, so applicants can still apply through our program areas, the executive, legislative, and judicial. Of those three program areas, you can apply to two of those in any given year. So that's what you know and what has stayed the same. New for 2025, applicants can now also directly apply to the legislative branch in artificial intelligence. You might formerly have known this as the Rapid Response Cohort, NAI. The specialized opportunity places fellows directly in Congress to provide AI expertise in legislative decision-making. If you're applying to a legislative fellowship, you must either select the legislative branch in AI or our traditional legislative branch program area. You cannot apply for both. And then also new for 2025, we are offering an optional third application to the Pathways to Policy Fellowship. So that is an opportunity where fellows utilize their subject matter expertise to ensure scientific evidence influences policy making in a variety of settings that are outside of the federal government. So that means you can be placed in a nonprofit organization, a corporation, or think tanks. In addition to applying to two program areas, you may add Pathways to Policy as a third application. However, if you are applying for a third program area, it must include Pathways to Policy. So you can still apply to executive, legislative, and pathways. It's just if you just can't do executive, legislative, and judicial. So Pathways to Policy is almost kind of a free application for anyone who's interested in applying to that as a program area. As for eligibility, applicants must be U.S. citizens, hold a doctoral degree in the sciences, social sciences, or engineering, and cannot be a full-time federal or AAAS employee. Those of you with a master's in engineering plus 3 years of professional engineering experience are also eligible to apply. With that, we have a lot of different opportunities, a lot of different partners willing to work with our fellows. And so you all here are representing so many different backgrounds from biological and physical sciences and social sciences, computer sciences, and engineering. And that diversity of discipline is so important to our partners and offices that host fellows and are looking for a wide range of backgrounds and skills. And to put today's session into context, we've been hosting one chat each month starting in June. We're glad to have you here today and invite you to join us for the last session next month, which will be focused fully on the application. Each chat will focus on a unique aspect, and you'll get to hear from different SCPF fellows at each live chat. And then for today's chat, we're focused on fellows who can talk about their experience adapting to change and you know changing their livelihoods to do this fellowship. So yeah, now to the purpose of today's session is to chat with fellows. Please ask questions. This is your time. So I'll moderate the conversation, but this is your time to ask our fellows your questions. Click in the question box in the menu on your screen and type your question in. You can also indicate a person or to whom your question is directed to, and we'll try to get to as many questions as we can today. And I'm happy to introduce you to our fellows joining. Amanda Burhout is a registered dietitian and public health nutrition scientist. She is the health policy director at the National Center for Health Research in Washington, D.C. NCHR communicates scientific evidence and support policies and regulations that improve patient and consumer health outcomes. Dr. Burhout works to engage and collaborate with policymakers and regulators and their staff on health policy issues. Amanda has led a non-traditional career path outside of academia with an intent to put research into practice through policy to improve the built environment and increase the availability and accessibility to healthy and delicious food and healthcare. Allison Wallace earned a Bachelor's of Arts in Biology from St. Olaf College and a PhD in Ecology and Evolution from Stony Brook University, supported by a NASA Global Change Fellowship. After teaching high school biology and developing the online K-12 curriculum Ranger Rosie, she joined Minnesota State University Moorhead in 2000, where she is now a professor of biosciences. She has chaired the sustainability program in biosciences department, advised secondary science education majors, and served as faculty development director. Her research spans science education, examining how undergraduates use writing and argumentation to address socio-scientific issues in grassland ecology, where she contributes data to a global research network. Wallace has secured 5 National Science Foundation grants and enjoys coordinating collaborative projects. From 2023 to 2025, she served as a AAAS Science and Technology Policy Fellow at the U.S. Department of State, focusing on climate policy curriculum. So big thank you to our panelists for joining here today. Before we go into some questions from the audience, I'll kick it off with one. If you maybe both of you can introduce yourself and then maybe speak to your motivation for pursuing a policy fellowship at the point of your career that you did. Amanda or Allison, if you can go ahead.
Sure, I'll jump in. Okay, so wait, the first part, my motivation for the fellowship, is that what you said?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So I started teaching at my university as my bio said in 2000. So I've been teaching for a long time, and I was thinking about this fellowship, but I was too busy trying to get tenure and figure out my courses and all that stuff. But I would say it was my students that really. I mean, they didn't tell me apply for the fellowship, but they had so many questions about what's happening in the government, what's happening with funding for different initiatives. How can we make things move faster? And so I thought this is a good time to see if I can go to Washington, D.C. and find out some of those questions. And so my motivation, I felt like I had a group of students pushing me to go see what's happening. And then I always knew I would come back to my position, which I am. I just started again a few weeks ago. And so that was my main motivation, was my students and my own curiosity.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me here today. Let's see. So I was a 21-22 legislative fellow. I worked in the U.S. Senate for a year on health policy. Prior to that, I had led kind of this non-traditional career, working in the nonprofit space, working for the federal government through another fellowship at the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, and had worked for an international nonprofit looking at nutrition policies and practices and how that translates into our built environment. I always wanted to apply science to solve a problem. I think just going through the academic process and through graduate school, I always thought I loved the research that I was doing. I was looking at food regulations and how that changes food labeling that we see in stores. And so it was just kind of like a natural progression to learn about this policy fellowship. I think the ultimate motivation for me is just always wanting to know how things work. Why are things the way they are? Why do I see what I see within the store the way it is? Why is it laid out that way? That kind of thing. And the AAAS fellowship just seemed like an unparalleled opportunity to kind of really get hands-on experience and learn, about what works and what doesn't always work. So thank you.
Thanks both of you for answering that. Some questions in the chat already. There's So this chat's kind of about adapting to change and kind of like reflecting to the different environments you might all be jumping in. Obvious questions for some folks coming into the space is kind of just like how does the political climate in DC change at different aspects in your careers or just in time that you were here. I do wonder if you can maybe speak to the if there was an environment change for when you did your fellowship to where you are now, um, maybe kind of for like coming at it from a how did the fellowship maybe help you adapt to different changes and help you prepare for environments that can change like on a dime just like that? I know that's like a lot in there, but
I can jump in if you want, Amanda. Is that okay? Okay. Yeah, that is a really big question, and I'm actually still processing my whole experience because I started at the Department of State in January of 24, and then I just finished this summer. And so, uh, first of all, so I guess the biggest change that I experienced was the presidential transition, transition from one administration to the next. And I got a front row seat of watching and participating in how our daily activities as well as our long-term goals and projects changed as a part of that. And how I managed that was really an excellent mentor, excellent supervisor, amazing colleagues that had been around a lot longer. And I was pretty new, and they assured me, this we go through changes. We, especially at Department of State, we're changing all the time. Everybody changes their position every 2 or 3 years almost. Um, and goes to a new place or a new title or a new portfolio. And so I really got kind of a firsthand tutelage in, okay, get ready for whatever's coming and then figure out how can I make good come out of that and how can I make good work and continue to collaborate with the folks around me. So I know that's kind of a vague answer. I have some more specifics I can share if you'd like, but really the people around me were so instrumental in helping kind of navigate a large scale change in our day-to-day activities.
Um, so I was a fellow, like I said, during 21, 22. So there wasn't an administration change. Um, but there was some changes actually within my office. I think there was a change in leadership 3 times. And so I think, it felt a little unsteady at different points. But the way that I tried to approach it was, seeing the opportunity, offering help as much as I could, and similar to what Allison said, really connecting with people around me who had similar experiences, to understand how to kind of take advantage and be useful to the office in which I was working. Um, I think that answers your question. Did I get it? Or
a little, yeah. I think
yeah,
too, I think something that could be helpful for folks is coming into this environment, right? Especially if you're coming from academia, if you're coming from like a nonprofit
sure.
position. How did you kind of like find yourselves working in a new environment with unfamiliar processes, right? And then how kind of the were you trained for that moment to be okay?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I guess to add to that, and let me know if I'm not getting it, okay? um, but, you know, gosh, I just learned so much during that year about the legislative process, about how actually during when there's a change in, who's in charge of different states, for example, and different Senate offices, the staff remains, and it was really kind of nice to see how everyone continued to work together. And that was really nice and consistent. I think, you know, learning about the legislative process was transformative, and really helped me to get where I am now. Because the environment, just in its nature, in any office or committee you work in within Congress, really things move so quickly. You have a proactive agenda and you have a reactive items that you have to work on. And so it really kind of trained me to keep pace with that and be prepared to shift my focus and attention and try to learn things very quickly. So I hope I answered your question.
No, you did. Uh, I think this could also be a good question for the both of you, and it's not related directly to change, but someone's asking if how you weighed applying to different fellowship areas, and I think it's interesting now that we're offering so many different ones in this year, how you ultimately chose to apply to where you ended up. So, Allison, for you in executive, or Amanda, for you in congressional, kind of like what made you go in that direction?
I could jump in first. Okay, so yeah, I wanted executive. I wanted to find out about the federal agencies and how they worked and how they actually kind of put into action the funding and the policies. And so for me, that was just a quick decision. The actual, I just say something though about the actual position and the agency I ended up working in. At the time I applied, I think there were 300 and some positions that we got to look at when we came to the finalist. And I checked all the ones that I would have loved to work for, and there was like 56. And so I was like so exciting. It was like a kid in the candy store, like EPA, NIH, DOD, there are all kinds of. So I guess within the executive branch, my advice would be to remain really open. And you'll hear this if you get to that stage. Be open to you might be able to work in a context you hadn't thought about before. So yeah, so I'll just say that.
For myself, I decided on I applied to the legislative fellowship through my professional society, and so that was the opportunity that was really highlighted, and so I went specifically for that, and it's only for the legislative branch fellowship through STPF. Um, I would also say, for me personally, I previously had some experience working in the federal government as through another fellowship, an ORISE fellowship, and so I knew about regulations, I knew about policy, but I didn't know about legislation or how things worked. So I was really excited and eager to learn about, the different steps in policy making. How something goes from an idea to, creating a draft proposal to, getting it through Congress, God willing, and getting into the federal agencies where the technical experts are to really kind of get into the details. So it was just kind of a progression in the next step for me.
Allison, I think that piece you kind of talked about being flexible in the process, really rings true. Not just in any year, but especially for as we kind of like navigate which agencies and which organizations, which companies are able to take on fellows, right? Um, I think sometimes there's this conception that folks will like come in, have this very set idea about where to go, where to join. And I think that can really limit you in your opportunities, right? And so kind of like again being open to different things and really setting yourself up to kind of like use your scientific skill set anywhere, right? And especially in ways that you might not know. I think is kind of the right attitude, especially for someone applying in a cycle like this one. um, Amanda, you had shared like kind of a story of like your office going through different leadership changes. I was wondering if for either of you, if you had another time where you could kind of like you had this unexpected change that disrupted your plans during the fellowship, and maybe how you handled it going forward.
I can jump in. Is that okay?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I actually have like a specific example. And without getting into too many details, but a couple of months after I started my fellowship, there was a opportunity for me to go to Bangkok as part of a team to do a training. So I was at the Foreign Service Institute where we design and execute trainings for foreign service officers. Anyway, so but there was and I was navigating this new environment, new people, and trying to figure out, my our workshops. But there was kind of this strange back and forth about whether I was going or I wasn't going or what was happening. And it turned out that a colleague of mine who was a presidential management fellow, who was originally going to sub for me in a course so I could go, her office elevated her so that she was going. So I know this is, I'm getting in the weeds here, but it was kind of impactful because I was, here I'm a pretty experienced professor. I come to this position and I was just kind of trying to figure out, how do I navigate this situation? And I was realizing that, I mean, I had Frank talk with my mentor who was supportive, but she was also talking with the dean, and that's the office that this other person was. So there's hierarchies and there's reasons for things to happen. So anyway, I ended up not getting to go to Thailand, and but I was gracious about it. I was fine. I was very supportive. I was helpful however I could from the stateside, and it ended up just, I think kind of being flexible and resilient to that disappointment, because I had some tears at home. You can ask my husband. I was like, I really wanted to go, but I just tried to be as much of a team player as possible. And then a few months later, my office said, guess what, we're going to send you to London. So I got London instead of Thailand. But so I guess a lesson I learned there is just be the team player, be collaborative, be supportive, put in energy where you can, and recognize that there's some things beyond your control, that I didn't quite understand the system as I was navigating it. Hopefully that makes sense.
Allison, I just want to say I so appreciate you being so open about your experience, and being vulnerable about it. Because not everything is perfect, right? A lot of times, like if you're not having some friction and some challenge, you're not necessarily learning. And so that was true for my fellowship as well. I think kind of a parallel, maybe somewhat parallel experience was, my background is like all public health, nutrition, and food related. And when I went to work in the office, that wasn't the portfolio that they needed help. And at first, this was like really upsetting to me because, I have all of this experience and I could offer so much. But as Allison correctly pointed out, there is so much happening behind the scenes that, and in particular, I think probably in both of our workplaces, so much like politics and things that, just aren't relevant for fellows to know about. So in dealing with that, I certainly was really frustrated at times. But like I said, with the transition in the office, I had the opportunity to work with different legislative assistants in different areas. So it wasn't necessarily nutrition focused, but I worked on veterans issues, on certainly a wide range of health policy issues, aging and disability. And so, you know, trying to see, the opportunity through that frustration was really helpful. Again, really relying on the other fellows that I was going through the year with. We were all having similar kinds of experiences. And just talking through with, your trusted people, whether that's another fellow or that's family or, a friend. But I think, through that kind of like friction, I've been able to grow so much to understand, the broader policy landscape, to see how different areas of policy really relate to one another. Because if you think about it, like within Veterans Affairs, aging and disability, or the healthscape, food and nutrition falls into all of that. And it can apply to all of those different populations. So, you know, certainly we've all experienced challenges, but I think really relying on your trusted people and really trying to see what you can gain and how you can be useful is really was helpful in moving forward.
Yeah, something I heard in the both of those responses is really just kind of like embracing being challenged, right? And I think like that's I going into the fellowship, like if I'm not on the recruiting space, if you should expect to get challenged sometimes, and that this isn't just a very easy thing, and it's not supposed to be a nice. It's not. I can be not that it isn't, but it's not supposed to be this like hunky dory, nice, pleasant thing, right? And I think for folks who are applying and being ready for it and embracing it, I think is a huge part of why. If you are interested in being a fellow, it's kind of like a core tenet, and I think that's policy work too, right? Um, Something else that's coming from the group is just some questions about maybe the selection process. And so, Allison, you went through it on the executive side. Amanda, you did it on the legislative. Would you maybe be able to share kind of your experience during the selection process and how you landed with who you did? And then, kind of like thinking through like that flexibility piece and how you were able to kind of like see all the opportunities, but then end up choosing the one that was meant for you.
Do you want to go first, Amanda? Okay. All right. Yours was further ago than mine. Yeah, so spring of 2023, as I said, to continue my story, I think I checked like 56 positions that I thought I would love any of them. I ended up getting 10 or 11, I think it was interviews, and you can also request more additional ones, or I don't know if they've changed it. And it was just the most delightful week. I mean, you have to look at my context. I'd been a professor in one job for 23 years, and then suddenly I hadn't interviewed for anything, and then suddenly I interview for all these positions in one week. And I guess the way I approached it was just a real chance for the interview week to get to know the federal agencies that I was interviewing for. So they had questions of me, of course, but then I got a chance to see what were they up to, what were they doing, and how might I be able to plug in, and did I have the expertise? And I was just as honest as possible. I remember one at the EPA, I said, I don't think I have the expertise for this. Why did you interview me? And then they explained how, well, you have a lot of experience working with people and problem solving and project management, and you will learn the techniques that you need, if you were chosen for this position. So that was really, really neat for me to hear. And so I just can't say enough about the process. In terms of the selection, I had, oh gosh, I had a couple just bubble up to the top that I just really felt very good about. And again, flexibility, I just said I would be happy in any of these. I also knew that there'd be a chance that I would go through the whole process and I wouldn't be selected right away and I would go back into a pool. So I got ready for that process as well. And I just tried to frame it as this is my chance to experience something new, do some problem solving, see how I can work in this different system than academia. As it worked out, the position that I had the best feeling about actually did come through, and so it was a really good match. Uh, where I was at the Department of State Foreign Service Institute doing education, which I love. So it was familiar that way, but in a very different context with different kind of students.
So I mentioned that the selection process, just to get into the fellowship, the application process was through my professional society and for the legislative fellowship. So it was a little bit different. But I guess once you get to the next phase, and if you're, selected and you become a fellow and you're trying to determine placement, which I think is what you're asking about. So for the legislative side, it's an interesting process. You receive like a list of offices and committees that are seeking fellows for the coming year. And they also list kind of like some provide a more detailed job description, others provide more basic. I think what I learned is to use that as a guide. And it doesn't necessarily mean that that's exactly what you'll work on, even if that's what the job description has. So you receive this list of offices and committees that are seeking fellows, and then there's a certain point where you reach out to offices and you start sending emails to see if you could set up a time to interview. I think I interviewed with maybe like 8 different offices based on those that had some kind of like health related something opportunity. And ultimately, I went with Senator Gillibrand, and I do think it was the best selection for myself as well. We're from the same area, so I was really familiar with the issues in New York State and from upstate New York. And what was the other thing I was going to say? Oh, I mean, and just her and, Senator Gillibrand in general she works across the aisle. And that was something that was really important to me, to find a member that was willing to work with both Republicans, of course, independents and Democrats, to see like what those relationships were like and how to kind of, I guess, for lack of a better phrase, build bridges, you know? So, yeah, so I selected her for that as well as for her, you know, her strong stances on issues for women. Um, so, yeah.
Thanks, y'all. Um, Another good question in here is about what you are doing after the fellowship, and so the opportunities that came after. I know Allison, you just left, but wanted to maybe ask like how how the fellowship impacted your next steps, and maybe what are some of the takeaways that you are still using in your day to day, or even with your career right now.
Sure. I'll start here. So, wow, the fellowship just learned so much. It really opened my eyes to understand kind of like the the pressure points where science and evidence were really valuable to the legislative and policymaking process. So just gaining that general awareness of where like scientists might be useful, and where their knowledge would be most useful to the staff working in those areas. Um, After the fellowship, it did take some time to find my next full time position. I ended up working at the US Food and Drug Administration for about a year and a half. Um, and through that, you know, I applied a lot of, um, so I was working in regulations, which was a little bit separated from, you know, the policymaking space. But I used a lot of the same skills in trying to coordinate between different groups of people, trying to find consensus among people who had different ideas on a certain topic. Um, in February, I was a part of the RIFs. And so recently, I joined the National Center for Health Research and am the health policy director here. And so my focus has turned once again from regulations to the policy making sphere. So we'll work. So I'm able to apply a lot of what I learned during the fellowship year in Congress to my current position. And also marry in, you know, the regulatory process from my time at FDA as well. Um, so, you know, it's been a natural progression. But for example, some things that we've recently been working on is sometimes we'll receive outreach from certain staffers from different offices or committees to ask us to comment on different legislative proposals. Um, Actually, just this Thursday, my boss, Dr. Zuckerman, will be testifying at the Energy and Commerce Committee meeting. I believe it's at 9:30, and that's related to breakthrough medical devices, which is something we've been working on fairly recently. So this is a long-winded way to say that you know, I've really been applying and using a lot of what I learned during the fellowship year to my current position and certainly to my immediate past position as well.
And I'll jump in and just say maybe kind of succinctly that I think I told you before that I always knew I would come back to my position as a academic, and I'm so excited to share with my students in my classes what I learned. My husband was also a fellow, and we're hoping to start maybe like a once or twice a month conversation in the library porch about science and technology policy. And so we can spread the word that way. We're also both active on the local government side of things. He was actually a city council member for several years, and we were parts of task forces. So I'm bringing in kind of my experience at the federal government on a local level too. One other thing, though, a lot of people do come to the fellowships looking for career opportunities that they might make a career change or they're beginning their careers. And I was surprised to, I wasn't really looking, but I could see, you know, different contracting positions or, you know, other ways that maybe, you know, if I wanted to make a switch or if I wanted to do something with an early retirement and try something else, you know, I now have some idea of where I could start and where I could start looking. And so that I had no idea before. So I think just spending time at that level just really opened my eyes to a lot of different possibilities for my students, for my colleagues, for myself. And of course it's evolving, especially now. With it, but where there's doors closed, I see other people getting positions and openings in other places. So that is happening.
Awesome. Feel free to pass on this because I think you guys both maybe talked about this a little bit. There's another question from the audience building on that. How have you carried the adaptability skills you've developed during your fellowship since into your career? Were there experiences from your prior training that made you especially adaptable? And are there other skills, whether ones you brought in or ones that you left with, that stand out as important?
Yeah, I think maybe I'll just say, I mean, I'm in what, week 3, week 4 of being back at my university. Um, I'm I'm having both a little bit more patience and a little bit more urgency with things that I see happening at, say, with my university and their response to a lot of the changes and the ripple effect that's happening. And so, yeah, what is my answer to that? That I just feel like I feel less helpless though, and I feel more connected to um, people are just people. People are sitting in a room and they're making decisions and they make policy changes and that affects other people. And then how do we respond to that? It's not magic. It's not a black box. It's just a matter of being aware and asking the hard questions, but also being gracious and trying to listen and recognize that there's constraints that administrators or systems or institutions might be under. So I know that was kind of a vague way, but I think I have a lot more understanding, so maybe I'm a better colleague, hopefully, at my university. But I also am asking some questions too. So I'm going to continue to do that.
So if I'm understanding the question correctly, or the couple of questions, this person is wondering about the adaptability skills that we learned during the fellowship and how we're like applying them outside. I think like the biggest takeaway is that like, you know, I'm going to make a guess that everyone who's watching this webinar is really bright and really curious, asks a lot of questions. And if there's one thing I know, we're really good at learning. And I think prior to the fellowship year, like I didn't realize how adaptable I was. So I guess it's partly like confidence in knowing that I can learn things very quickly and I can be pretty good at it. So I think that'd be probably the biggest takeaway, confidence and knowing I can learn a lot.
Yeah. I appreciate kind of like a skills-based conversation because like the way the fellowship is set up is you have to hit this baseline, right? And then once you've hit that, it's look, you're kind of thinking about what are the skill sets that'll help you be successful in a different type of role, right? There's a few questions in here that I'll kind of like ask, like, oh, like how do you position yourself, or like what parts of your application stood out, or how did you kind of like separate yourself? And I think we can me as like a person who works here can maybe point to like science communication or like point to the rubric. But for both of you, maybe what were some of the things that you think really helped you in your application or kind of like helped you not stand out, but in a way that like made you feel like you were doing you were showing the right skill set to get to the next step?
I think, again, my process was a little bit different. But I think, I had been building, um, kind of my interest in the policy space and being able to show the progression, like being able to tell my story and honestly, just showing how excited I was by it. I remember seeing the application being like, this is mine. This is mine. Um, I think that there's a lot of really qualified, remarkable people in this world. And, some of it's luck, right? But I think being able to tell your story and the progression of how you arrived here, why are you here? What's important to you? And like, what was the moment for you? What was the moment that you thought of like, like, this doesn't make sense to me? How did we arrive here? How does, how does my knowledge that I've gained through my education and experience, lived experiences, how can that contribute to the policymaking process, whether that's in any of the branches of government or in the nonprofit space, which is where I'm working now. Um, yeah, so I think just telling your story and demonstrating your uh, excitement.
I think a good follow-up to that is, with all that, considering all that, how did you adjust your communication styles to in working with different audiences or engaging with policymakers or stakeholders?
Maybe oh, go ahead, Amanda. Okay. Um, so this is kind of specific to my position at the Foreign Service Institute, but I remember an academic for many years, used to getting up and professing in front of a class, um, but recognizing how clear, direct, succinct, practical my communication needed to be. What did they need? When do they need it? Now, and we needed to figure out how to apply whether it was climate policy initiatives or, grant opportunities or all kinds of information. There is a time and place for some background and some of that sciencey stuff, and we certainly added it, but um, and did a really good job with that. But it was always couched in a need to know and a practical basis, at least in my context. We call our courses tradecraft courses. So what do these folks need to know so that they can go fly back to their embassies and start working on those policies?
I would say kind of similar to what Allison said. From the legislative side, I think for one, it's a learning experience. You are going in and just understanding that you don't know everything, observing, and a way to adapt my writing. One way I approached it was to see examples. I asked for all of the examples of like one-page policy memos that were, based on, you know, uh, legislative proposals related to science, to see how I could adapt my language. Um, I think also just trying to identify the problem they're trying to solve. So whether it's going back to their embassies and, acting accordingly or informing people accordingly, it's what is the background to this legislative proposal? What problem is this trying to solve? What is the current situation, and why would this make it better or worse, or somewhere in between? So thinking about it from taking a step back and kind of looking at the broader issues and how, whether it's a policy, legislative proposal, or a regulation, how that impacts that larger environment and issue that they're trying to solve. But it's a learning process, and you will make mistakes. And hopefully, your mentors are as forgiving as mine were and willing to, kind of guide you. But I would encourage you to look to them and to ask for examples of what they think is good work.
For folks who might be feeling apprehensive, right, in the current moment and about joining a completely different environment, um, what advice would you give for someone to kind of like help them approach the experience with like that confidence you were talking about earlier? Um, so, for somebody who this might be a complete different shift in what they have been doing, anything you would tell that person?
Yeah, maybe I'll jump in. I was aware of these fellowships and I didn't apply for them early in my career because I was at a primarily undergraduate institution. I was changing some of the focus of my research and I thought, I don't think I'm a top-notch researcher enough. And so I actually didn't have the confidence that way. Like, oh, do I have enough publications? Can I come into Washington and, blow them away with my science expertise? Well, I think it was nice to mature as a scientist and do well as a colleague and a faculty member and accumulate a lot of different experiences working with people and problem solving. So I think when you mentioned the confidence thing, coming back to that, um, you are going to be valued for a lot more than just your science knowledge. You have to have that. But if you have other experiences to bring to the table, that's really what they value. And then as long as you can talk um, uh, intelligently and concisely and clearly, about the science and the technology policy, you will fit in with your other experiences. Hopefully that made sense. But yeah, so I think, broaden your expectation of what kind of experiences would give you the confidence and the ability to do well in this fellowship.
I think, I don't know, just generally speaking, just be forgiving of yourself, and think of yourself in someone else's shoes. Like if they were going or considering the same application, if it was one of your good friends, you would encourage them, right? And see their strengths. And so if you can write about yourself consider yourself from like a good friend's perspective, that might be useful for you to kind of get the confidence to apply and to know that you are absolutely capable. I would also encourage you to think about what you were like in your first year of your graduate program. I don't know about you, but I was like, really insecure and really like, thinking that I couldn't do it. But with each year and with talking to other people who have gone through the process, and understanding that this is not, you know, none of us were born to be pre-selected for this type of opportunity. Like you have to work for it and you have to want it. And we all have our insecurities. So I would encourage you to reach out to past fellows and understand that this is a very, building confidence through your career is just a very normal thing that maybe we don't talk about as much as we should. But just do it. Just apply. You'll be good.
Uh, One of the, I think, more fun questions I had was maybe asking you about your stories about relocating to DC and just having the experience in DC that you had. For a lot of folks, it can be a big transition, and what were kind of like maybe the more personal or professional adjustments you had to make when you started and came to the district.
I'd love to talk about that if I could, because I have this house in a small northwestern Minnesota town, so moving from a house I'd lived in for 23 years at the same job to Washington, D.C. was a big change for me. Um, and my husband and I both did this. And so I'm glad that he won and I didn't, because my first impulse was to get like a little studio and bring camp chairs, like it's only a year, right? I don't want to uproot everything. But we ended up staying 2 years. We didn't know we were going to stay 2 years. And we also just embraced the idea of being in DC. We paid a little more money than we thought maybe we were going to originally, but we got a townhouse where people could visit and where we could easily get on the metro. And it was just an incredible experience to spend time in a place that I've never lived. Um, so personally, just kind of our living situation, we tried to interact with fellows quite a bit. We had a musical fellow group, so we had musicians come over almost once a week. We had games. We had just it was like going back to college. It was great. We also embraced the idea of the free museums, going to the monuments, going to the National Arboretum. And just so if you do get a chance to do this, it's a whole life experience, and to just immerse yourself and not just, go to work every day and only do that thing. Try to embrace the whole thing. So I guess that would be my advice.
I agree with everything that Allison said, um, with the disclaimer that I was already in the area. So I live in Maryland, so it's not far at all. But this life and this opportunity was wildly different than my life before the fellowship. So, like Allison said, I agree with, taking the opportunities. There are Friday night happy hours to meet with other fellows. Definitely taking advantage of, interacting with people outside of your daily work life, and taking advantage of all that DC has to offer. There's so much to do and for free, like Allison mentioned. So
You guys hit at this a little bit, but there's actually a question in here about how often you connected with other fellows, and is there a sense of community? I know you all have a WhatsApp group, but I feel like there's much more that you all can document.
We miss our WhatsApp group. Well, they're still in the WhatsApp group, but I just left a few months ago. But yeah, we're still in contact quite a bit with folks, either still there or they've moved on. I can't say enough about the community building aspect. It's been really, really special to, and then you actually get a chance to kind of live vicariously through some of their experiences at a different agency or some of the legislative fellows. I got a chance to see that. So yeah, it's a holistic experience. And that's what the advice I would give you. Just keep your ears and eyes open, and you can get engulfed in your position, of course, but that's not why you're there just for that. It's for the whole experience.
Yeah, I agree. I agree again with everything you've said. Yeah, I think the community was an unexpected gain. It's been great. I'm still in contact with the fellows from my cohort, and I'll probably see them this coming weekend. We try to stay in touch pretty regularly through different group chats, but yeah, it's wonderful to be in contact with people with similar interests who have gone through similar experiences. There's a real that in and of itself builds community. So yes, interacting, and yes, the job is important. Performing and delivering is important, and taking care of your social life. And if you can think about it, it's also actually your professional network as well. So it's fun, but it also can lead to some other pretty incredible opportunities after the fellowship as well.
We're getting pretty close to the end of the hour, so I'll leave it to you one last question. Um, Beyond your fellowship years, how has learning to adapt through SDPF shaped the way you approach change in your career or in your life?
Would you mind repeating that one more time?
Yes.
Thank you.
Beyond the fellowship year, how is learning to adapt through SDPF, so adapting through us, change the way that you approach change?
um, I guess it's kind of a similar answer to what I said before, adapting to change because you're pushing yourself to grow. And like I said, there will be friction, there will be challenges, but understanding that you will get through it and you'll do pretty darn good as well. There will be things that you'll do great at, things that you'll struggle with. And in the end, it's like a diamond. All of the pressure comes out, and you're a diamond. You're a beautiful diamond at the end of this fellowship. um, in all seriousness, I think just knowing how capable I am as a result of going through the application process, interacting with other fellows and understanding what they've gone through and how we all got through it. And again, just learning and learning about myself. I hope that answered your question.
No, I just forgot what I was going to say. I think, yeah, actually, sorry, I had an answer, but I have one little thing that I am going to admit and say, just to encourage you all. I applied once and didn't hear back anything. In fact, my husband and I applied, and we didn't, we didn't make any cut. And we thought, oh, great. And then the next, I think we skipped 2 years. And then the next time we applied, we both were on sabbatical. So we had maybe more time to really think about our applications. And then we both ended up getting, going through the whole process. And so be persistent, um, and, uh, um, and see how you can frame your mind about how you would fit into this experience, I guess. Um, I didn't answer the question because I kind of forgot what the first part was.
No, it's a better response of like what kind of advice you would give to folks. So I appreciate it. And it's not a rare story too, Allison. There are a lot of folks who receive the fellowship in their second or third time applying. So spending time on the application, really crafting it to share your story, I think are all really good pieces of advice. So um one thing, yeah, so thank you both for making the time today and for sharing your stories. I know um, our fellows are usually the best resource for folks to learn more about the fellowship and to get a better in-depth understanding. So thank you both for making the time, and we'll start to wrap up. Okay. Again, thank you all for coming today and asking great questions. Please visit our website to read more about the program. We also have an archive of all of our live chats that we've had earlier this year. Really recommend watching those as we hit on different topics with different fellows. And we'll also send you a recording of this chat in the coming days. Lots of questions that came in that we aren't able to answer, but you're more than welcome to email us directly at fellowships@AAAS. And you can also follow us on our socials. We'll always kind of continue that conversation if you have any questions. You're also more than welcome to reach out to any fellows who are open to it and ask questions. I think it's one of the kindest groups you can reach out to and advice for your application. But you're always welcome to do that. But yeah, next live chat. It's our last live chat before the application deadline. It's October 7th. We'll go right into the application and talk about some strategies and tips, which I think a lot of you want to see. But yeah. Thank you all. Appreciate you coming by and spending the hour.